In July 2011, the Horn of Africa was hit by a nutrition crisis. For MSF's French section, Somalia is the most vulnerable and severely affected country. Not only is it ravaged by drought, but also by civil war. 500,000 people have already fled their homes. In spite of the enormous difficulties involved in delivering aid in this country, MSF scaled up its activities in August.
For several months, we've been trying to negotiate, not just to gain access because we already have that. We've been running activities for years. But we want to expand our activities to provide a medical response for today's crisis.
Present in Mogadishu and in 10 regions in the country, MSF has seen a sharp increase in malnutrition. The lack of hygiene in the displaced people's camps and the rainy season are also causing an increase in the number of cholera cases. But for the teams, the main health challenge is measles.
40,000 children have been vaccinated. It's good for those children, but it's not enough. At least 10 times more need to be vaccinated in order to have a sufficiently large coverage to have an impact on the epidemic.
Yet while medical aid is saving tens of thousands of lives, the security of the teams is under constant threat. On the 13th of October, 2 volunteers from the Spanish section, Blanca and Montserrat, were kidnapped in the Somali refugee camps in Dadaab, Kenya. At the end of December, Philippe and Andrea, 2 volunteers from the Belgian section, were killed by a gunman in Mogadishu. MSF condemned these attacks against aid workers. But at the end of May, Blanca and Montserrat were still being held, thought to be somewhere in Somalia, and MSF has had to scale down its activities in Mogadishu and Dadaab.
The first cases of cholera appeared in October 2010, and since then Haiti has had to cope with new outbreaks every year. Vomiting, acute diarrhea, dangerous levels of dehydration, rapid contagion. The disease has become a serious burden on a country where health facilities are already under massive strain.
I started to be sick, and when I touched my face with my hand, all I could feel were bones. It was like all my flesh had melted away. People started gathering around me. They brought me a bed. They made me lie down on it so they could carry me. The road was really torturous, and so was my breathing.
Cholera is at its height in the rainy season, from May to November. During the 2011 rainy season, MSF treated almost 40,000 patients. Although the epidemic is serious, there is some good news. The mortality rate is decreasing.
This is because the care personnel are much better trained than they were to start with, and the population is better informed, more aware. People are now reacting at the first warning sign of diarrhea.
So more and more Haitians like Joseph are getting treatment in time.
I can sit up now, and yesterday I stood up for the first time. I've still got a bit of diarrhea, but I've stopped being sick.
Given the recurrent nature of this epidemic, the authorities are inadequately prepared. They clearly took less preventive measures and ensured less medical supplies than last year, obliging MSF to intervene once again. There's been another big change for MSF's teams in the last 12 months. They had been working in tents at Saint Louis Hospital since the earthquake, but they packed everything up, dismantled the operating theatres, and transported all the patients to the new Drouillard Hospital.
We didn't want to spend more than a year in a tent hospital, although it actually turned out to be a pretty good solution. We had very few cases of post-op infections. We were expecting more asepsis problems, but that didn't happen. So tents are good in this kind of situation, but not over the long term. So we had to build a hospital. We've built this hospital to be earthquake resistant.
The teams working at Drouillard provide intensive care, medical care, orthopedic and visceral surgery, and treatment for severe burns. They've set up their base near the Cité Soleil slum area because the health needs here are enormous. The Haitians living here are considered to be the most vulnerable in Port-au-Prince.
Damas, Homs, Alep, Daraa. Every day in one or other of these Syrian towns, violent fighting breaks out between the security forces of Bashar al-Assad's regime and the protesters and the Free Syrian Army made up partly of deserters. The repression ordered by the regime is fierce. Shelling and sniper fire can be heard at every street corner.
When there's a raid, they shoot randomly at everyone. Old people, women, children, any moving person is a target.
In the hospitals, the security forces are imposing a reign of terror.
We tried to find someone who could treat us until 4 in the morning. The other man's injuries were worse than mine. He'd been shot in the hand and buttock. But all the doctors had been arrested for treating the wounded, and they were forced to sign a document saying they would only treat certain cases, the ones the government would allow.
MSF's repeated attempts to obtain authorization to work in Syria have all failed, but it's been able to supply the doctors on site with medical supplies. One team managed to get into Idlib secretly. They operated on as many people as possible and then fled before the army arrived. According to doctors there, being caught treating the wounded is a more serious offense than being caught with a gun.
At first, when the demonstration started, we sent the injured to public hospitals. But then we were told that injured demonstrators were being tortured or left untreated. Doctors who treat the wounded are also being harassed by the security forces. Security is what worries doctors most. It's difficult. The risk of being arrested is considerable. But despite that risk, many doctors are putting their lives in danger in order to abide by their medical oath.
On its program in Amman in Jordan, MSF is treating the wounded who make it over the border and gathering their testimonies. In February 2012, it organized a press conference and released some of these stories. It denounced the use of medicine as a weapon of persecution and called for the neutrality of healthcare facilities to be re-established.
Okay, thank you. So we can proceed to the port. Is it everything clear? We can proceed.
Between March and May 2011, Misrata was under siege. The only way to bring in supplies or evacuate the seriously injured was by boat. The town rapidly found itself short of nursing staff.
Most of the nurses who were working in Misrata before, and in Libya in general, they were foreigners. And with the war, they had to leave the country. So they were from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, India, Philippines, so they left the country.
To cover for this shortage of nurses, MSF trained up medical students. From May to October 2011, the teams worked mainly in Abad and Qasar Ahmed hospitals, where they gave consultations and performed surgery mostly on people wounded at the front.
We had 3 patients come in this afternoon from the fighting in Sirte. They were brought to a small primary healthcare clinic between Sirte and Misrata where they were stabilized, and then they were brought here via ambulance.
There are a lot of serious injuries due to the type of weapons being used, mainly heavy artillery, firearms and explosives, often causing extremely complex fractures or deep wounds, hence the use of external fixators and even the need for amputations.
I just want him to stand before he...
These patients then needed functional rehabilitation care. So MSF began providing physiotherapy treatment in Qasar Ahmed Hospital and at the military prison too, as there were Gaddafi supporters among the wounded. The doctors continued working in the prison until the French section left the country at the end of 2011, after handing over to a team from MSF Belgium. At the beginning of 2012, the Belgian team discovered that the prisoners they were treating were being tortured. It decided to cease its activities in the prison and speak out against what it had witnessed.
Every year, the hunger gap leads to malnutrition in the Sahel. A poor harvest in 2011, combined with rising food prices, is likely to make the situation even more serious. Facing this recurrent problem, the governments and aid operators are beginning to adapt their response.
What's different this year is that countries in the Sahel region anticipated the food crisis well in advance, calling for mobilization back in October, November, and leaving enough time for the necessary resources to be put in place. For example, the different UN agencies and governments concerned have planned to treat 1 million severely malnourished children, which is very ambitious, bearing in mind that last year, between 500,000 and 600,000 children were treated.
500,000 enfants qui ont été pris en charge.
This ambitious response will, however, be hampered by logistical problems, especially in rural areas, and also by security problems caused by the presence of groups belonging to the jihad movement. In Chad, MSF sent out teams to assess the situation at the beginning of March. They discovered alarming levels of malnutrition. By the end of March, MSF had opened a program in the Yao district, in the center of the country, running a 20-bed inpatient unit and a range of external activities.
Les activités externes consistent au dépistage.
Our outreach activities consist of screening for cases of malnutrition and distributing a month's supply of therapeutic food to those in need. At the same time, we vaccinate against measles, BCG, yellow fever, and DPT. These activities are being carried out through health centers and directly in the villages. We're currently working in 9 health centers and at 18 village health posts.
The population is very dispersed in this district, making work for the MSF teams complicated.
You have to remember that the population is very spread out in this area, so accessibility is an issue. That's why we developed a new strategy of distributing the therapeutic food on a monthly rather than a weekly basis, like we do in other places.
Emergency response is not the only possible course of action. In both Mali and Niger, MSF has set up pediatric nutrition programs, running effective and economical treatment and prevention activities. In Massakori, in Chad, village community workers are trained in the crucial first steps in detecting and stopping malnutrition. Results so far are promising.
Every week they monitor the children. They measure their mid-upper arm circumference. As well as that, they are given a week's supply of therapeutic food. If they see any children presenting signs of a complicated disease, they refer them to the health center, where they will be seen by a nurse.
Milk-based foods are an essential therapeutic component for children who are malnourished or at risk of malnutrition. Yet they are not distributed systematically by aid programs. MSF wants to see a change, and for the distribution of these foods to be as generalized as vaccination.
We left everything behind. We're sleeping in the open with our children. We have nothing to eat or drink, and nothing to protect us from the sun or the dust.
This is Oudelan province in Burkina's Sahelian strip. These Malian refugees left their country in haste, chased away by the fighting.
I left Mopti on the 2nd of February earlier this year at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At the border I left with 35 families. Some were on a bus, others in their own car.
When I left, I had no transport. I left everything behind. When I got to the border, I was stuck there for 2 days.
At the end of their journey, they disappear into one of the camps where they build themselves a makeshift shelter. The hunger, thirst and heat are almost unbearable.
Whatever people bring with them, they share with everyone else. Now there's nothing left.
MSF's teams are providing emergency assistance in the 4 camps in Oudelan province.
As well as the more common complaints, what we're seeing most amongst the refugee and local population are respiratory infections due to the hot, dry climate and the wind. Hygiene conditions are bad, so we're also seeing a lot of skin infections, typically related to poor hygiene and a lack of water, which is in limited supply in the region.
The teams have also found some cases of severe acute malnutrition in children. This is the Sahel, and like in many other countries, there's drought, and the food stocks from the previous harvest are now exhausted. The arrival of tens of thousands of extra people makes the situation even more complicated.
This constant influx of people is going to worsen an already worrying food and nutrition situation.
Yet there is still insufficient humanitarian assistance. Every day, new refugees arrive in these camps in Burkina Faso. The World Food Programme's food distributions are still not covering their needs. For a few kilos of food or a few liters of water, people have to wait for hours in the desert sun.
It is the end of November in Douekwe and the west of Côte d'Ivoire. The conflict ended several months ago, but the coming legislative elections, persistent violence and frequent land disputes are still a threat for a displaced population, still afraid to go home.
We've been hit, beaten up, killed even. That's why we fled to come to the mission. Now we are being told to go home, but living conditions there are very poor. We have no homes, no house to go back to. Everything is ruined.
Despite their concerns, these displaced people will have to leave the camp set up by the Catholic mission.
More needs to be done about security, especially in the villages and camps. That's where it's worst. It's in the forest and plantations that things are happening. It's on the roads out to the villages that the security needs to be restored.
An MSF team is working in Douekwe Hospital. Patient numbers are high because health facilities elsewhere in the region are not functioning properly. There is a shortage of medicines, and in spite of the promises made by the new government, in many places people are still being asked to pay for care.
This morning, a mother came in saying that her child had been ill for several days. She said that yesterday she went to the hospital at Bengolo, which is nearly 20 miles away, but they didn't have any medicines. She had to sleep at the hospital, outside, waiting for the first bus of the morning to come here to Douekwe Hospital, because we've got medicines here. But unfortunately, it was already too late. He had acute meningitis and didn't survive.
Blue Lakin was deserted during the fighting. Life is getting back to normal, but the conflict has left its mark. The MSF team that had been working in its hospital has finally left. The organization is gradually withdrawing from health facilities where its help is no longer needed, but it is still working at the Douekwe and Thai hospitals and in a health center near Giklo.
The Central African Republic is located at the heart of one of the world's most unstable regions. It's also in the grip of a major humanitarian crisis. Major, but forgotten, underfunded, and overlooked. The Central African Republic is in a state of chronic medical emergency.
Today, when we look at the overview of MSF's activities, our budget is about 3/4 the size of the budget of the Ministry of Health. And when you look at the work that's being done outside of Bangui, we provide probably 50% of the healthcare access outside of the capital.
Malaria, diarrheal diseases, and respiratory infections are among the leading causes of mortality.
The fact that we found rather common causes of mortality shows that the deaths are essentially preventable, and that there's basically a problem of access to primary health care, both in rural areas and in the city of Carnot.
In 2010, Epicentre conducted a series of mortality surveys in the country, and again in 2011. They found that in many areas, mortality rates are well beyond the emergency threshold. In the town of Carnot, for example, the mortality rate in children under 5 is now 7 per 10,000 and per day. This prompted MSF to write a report in an attempt to put the plight of this country back on the international agenda. MSF has also decided to extend and develop its action here.
MSF is reorienting its activities in Carnot to dramatically increase the access to primary and secondary health care So primary health care is really literally having small clinics out in the villages that allow women to bring their children into the clinic to get the very most basic care. And after that, we ensure a system of referral so people can get from these remote clinics to the central hospital. In addition, in the hospital in Carnot, we're opening the pediatric ward to provide hospitalization care for children free of charge.
MSF has been working in the Central African Republic since 2006, but most of the population still has very limited access to basic care. Health needs are enormous and aid desperately lacking.
The diplomatic toings and froings between South Sudan and its northern neighbour have been going on against a backdrop of violence for months now, concentrated on the dispute over oil. At the beginning of May, the situation was still unstable. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, tens of thousands of people are in need of urgent assistance. The states of Unity and Upper Nile are prime examples. Lemon Musa used to live in Sudan. After a long journey, she managed to reach South Sudan with her child.
It's very cold at night and in the morning. I think it was the cold that made my child sick because we sleep outside on the ground. We have nothing to cover ourselves. No blanket, no shelter. We're just sleeping under a tree.
MSF is working in several camps providing assistance to people who have fled the combat zones. The flow of new arrivals is endless. Among them are children in urgent need of care. Violence is not the only difficulty facing the country. Tensions are running high between communities, particularly in the state of Jonglei. Food insecurity is increasing, and there are frequent epidemics of infectious diseases. Less than a year since independence, much of the country's healthcare is being provided by NGOs such as Médicos Sem Fronteiras. MSF is working in Awil, the only hospital in the northern state of Bahr el Ghazal. 3 out of 4 inhabitants live below the poverty threshold. For the teams, the priority is mother and child health care.
It's very common for a woman under 30 to have 7 or 8 children. And of course, frequent pregnancies, you're going to statistically get more miscarriages.
MSF teams had set themselves the target of bringing mother and child mortality down below the 1% mark. In 2011, they met this target.
Pakistan is not short of health facilities, yet whole sections of its population, refugees and displaced, vulnerable or isolated people, are denied access to health care. For a variety of socio-economic, cultural or security-related reasons, they don't receive adequate treatment. So in 2010, MSF opened a program in the hospital at Hangu, not far from the tribal zones and the border with Afghanistan. The teams are now working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the hospital's emergency and surgical departments. In 2011, they treated almost 20,000 patients.
We get lots of trauma cases, road accidents and bullet wounds. Then, secondly, there are lots of digestive and pulmonary infections. And thirdly, lots of mortality and morbidity among children aged under 5.
There are 2 explanations for this high level of mortality.
Firstly, there's serious bilateral bronchopneumonia, which is highly asphyxiating. Secondly, there's the fact that they wait so long before coming to the hospital, so treatment is started at a very late stage.
The instability in this region, plagued by armed fighting and religious conflicts, causes frequent displacements of the population, and this is one of the reasons for delays in accessing care. These delays are particularly harmful for pregnant women. To improve maternal health care, an MSF midwife has been working in the hospital's Mother and Child Centre since last May, training the personnel and providing them with support, especially for complicated deliveries.
After years of war, Chechenya's healthcare system is in a critical condition. It lacks specialized doctors, qualified personnel, and the means to provide adequate treatment. And cardiovascular care has been particularly hard hit by these shortages. Heart disease is the leading cause of mortality in the country.
Until now, we didn't have all this in Chechnya. We couldn't treat them in time. We couldn't do a thrombolytic procedure, which involves dissolving blood clots, and the mortality rate was high.
MSF launched a program in 2010, but the first patients were treated at the beginning of 2011, once the staff had been properly trained and all the necessary medicines and equipment acquired: defibrillators, electrocardiography machines, and Holter monitors.
In July of this year, we performed the hospital's first coronary thrombolysis procedure. Since then, we've done several. Our doctors are very proud that they can provide patients with this kind of care. That's 4 lives saved.
This coronary thrombolysis procedure is the first cardiac emergency intervention in MSF's entire history, and there were more than 800 admissions to this unit in 2011. But their work in Chechnya is not confined to cardiology. Pediatric and gynecological programs are also underway to reduce mortality and improve access to care.
March 2012, demonstrations outside the headquarters of Novartis in New York. The long-running legal saga between the Swiss pharmaceutical giant and the Indian government is not yet over. MSF is afraid, along with many others, that this court case will have disastrous consequences.
We are really worried that it will mean the end of generic competition in key areas, and that will undermine our ability and others to be able to continue to rely on low-cost quality medicines.
Novartis is challenging a provision under India's patent law. The section concerned, dubbed 3D, limits companies' rights to patent new forms of a known substance.
It says that you cannot get a patent on a minor tweak to a known medicines unless you can show that that tweak is new and that it has a significant therapeutic effect.
Novartis is defending one of its anti-cancer drugs, but MSF fears the court case will jeopardize the production of many generic medicines.
If Novartis wins this case against the Indian government, that will mean that more medical technology will be granted patents in India. That will mean less affordable medicines for us and for many others. In times where funding for global health is under threat, access to affordable medicines is more important now than ever.
Novartis is not the only threat to the production of generics in India. Over the last few years, there have been frequent demonstrations in New Delhi by HIV-positive people from all over the region, concerned about the consequences of the trade agreements being negotiated between India and the European Union.
India, because it's the key source of generic competition, is now the subject of multiple attacks, not just through litigation by pharmaceutical companies, but also the EU is currently negotiating a free trade agreement with India, and they're also seeking to undermine safeguards in Indian law.
The measures planned by the European Union could prevent the production of generic medicines. Yet these medicines are used to treat a large majority of the HIV-positive people in developing countries, including children. Their survival depends on the availability of these medicines.
The situation is not recent, but every year the same observations are made. The tuberculosis vaccine offers little protection. The diagnosis tests are not sensitive enough, and the treatment is too long, too taxing, and too complex.
You have a patient in a context where they weigh 27 kilograms, and this patient is expected to not only take 6 months of injections, 10 pills a day for 21 months at minimum, but they're also expected to have a good appetite and maintain their nutrition and gain weight and go about living their normal life. And it's a lot to expect.
90% of deaths occur in resource-limited countries, where there is an urgent need for new diagnostic and therapeutic means. These innovations are slow in coming. The most recent is a molecular diagnostic test, which rapidly detects the presence of the bacillus and resistance to the main antibiotic. There are two reasons why doctors consider fast action to be a priority.
Reasons. One is the person's own health, and the second is the public health aspect. Yeah. So the patient is suffering from disease and they need treatment. So in order to provide the best treatment, you want an accurate diagnosis. That's the number one thing. But then, as is the case of TB, which is probably unique, it's so contagious, and the more quickly you get the first case on treatment, the less chance there is of spreading that first case's disease to the next case and the next case and the next case.
The first results obtained with this new test show a marked improvement in screening, but it is still expensive and difficult to use. Further hope lies with two new molecules which could be a cure for resistant forms of the disease and change the lives of tuberculosis sufferers.
I started treatment 10 months ago. I take pills and they give me injections too. When I started taking the drugs, I felt my insides burning. I felt terrible. But now I'm used to the drugs and everything is fine. I feel much better.
For MSF, tackling tuberculosis remains a priority. In 2011, it treated around 25,000 patients, including 3,000 children. Every day, the teams are witness to the dire need for innovation in this field.